So, hello and welcome to the New Gig podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Hodgson, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Autism, ADHD, Dyslexia career coach, Kelly Redden. How are you doing, Kelly?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Now, Kelly, please give us a little bit
Excellent.
of a background on yourself and your journey, and not just the career, but also what you're doing today, because it's a very interesting angle that you're covering.
Okay. So for 20 years, I've been working with people with autism. 16 of those years, I worked with children. I worked throughout 13 countries, and I worked mainly as a teacher and as a therapist. The last 4 years, I've been working more with adults and teens with ADHD as well, and that's in educational institutions as well as in the workplace. So about 4 years ago, I started Logic Evolution, and that was when I was still living in the States. I'm now living in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And my focus is getting more people prepared and ready for the workplace. But when we talk about people with autism or people with neurodiversity in general, we need to make sure that the environment is created that's more inclusive, right? So
Yeah.
if you talk about theoretical models of disability, this is kind of getting a little bit technical, but it makes sense when I explain it to people, is that for like the past 80 years, we've been thinking that, okay, we need to fix that person with autism or ADHD in order for them to fit into society. But actually, that's the wrong way of looking at it. I subscribe to the societal model of
Yeah.
disability, which means we don't have an inclusive environment for us to thrive. I'm autistic as well. I was just recently diagnosed.
Okay.
And the
Right.
reason I got the reason I got diagnosed was when I started working with adults. Of course, I was working mainly with children, and the children were mainly nonverbal. And of course, a child can't really articulate what it's like to have autism.
Mm.
I started making a lot of parallel lines, and then I was just recently diagnosed about 6 months ago,
Mm.
which is why I think I was drawn to work with children with autism 20 years ago.
And how does this manifest itself in your case? You've been working with children, but in social and also professional situations, has it been something you've been considering before, or is it just a situation where there's been certain triggers that you've been party to?
That's a really good question. I've always been a loner. I've
Okay.
always thought differently. Even my family, I didn't fit it. I was the black sheep of the family. So growing up, I was very athletic, right? I participated in a lot of sports, but I never felt a sense of belonging. I participated, but I didn't belong. And
Mm.
that carried on throughout my life, right? So I never, like throughout my work career especially, I think that was where my autism was very prevalent, is that some people with autism have a very strong sense of justice, and we don't understand hierarchies. It
Okay.
doesn't make you a good employee, right? Because
Yeah.
I don't understand office politics. I don't participate in office politics. And, that's what it takes sometimes to hold on to a job. And I wasn't very successful at that. But I tried, like I saw what people were doing, and I was like, okay, maybe if I act like that, I'll be accepted, right? So
Mm.
it was always a distance between myself and others, and even within my own family. But I think my father was autistic actually, and I think my grandfather on my mother's side was autistic as well. So and socially, I like deep conversations. I'm very much into history. I like to study about what happened at Chernobyl, or I just watched a documentary about Shakespeare.
Yeah.
These are things that I'm really interested in, like history, World War II especially. But when I go out and I talk to people, they ask me, "Are you married? Do you have kids?" Well, no and no, but is that's not something I would ask someone. So my
Yeah.
approach to social situations is very different as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the small talk and the kind of, I don't want to be too disparaging, but the kind of banal questions that come up again and again. What are you doing? What's your
Mhm.
family situation? Where are you going on holiday? It's kind of the stock, rather dull questions that you get from time to time that people have
Yeah.
the people who are thinking of something to say to fill up the time, as opposed to actually bring out anything meaningful or having a deeper discussion.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that seems to be a sort of a common issue like that. But of course, I think it's great what you're discussing there, actually, Kelly, because it just shows that the gap between the world of work or the traditional world of work and the fact that there is an increasing number of people who just don't feel part of it. They don't feel like
Mm,
they want to be part of this traditional 9 to 5 world with its office politics, its set hours, set ways of
mhm.
doing things, and rather limiting framework in many cases.
Definitely. And I don't fit in. I don't fit into anyone's box. And that's why people are quite puzzled by me.
Mm,
I don't think they quite know where to plug me in. Which cubbyhole does she fit in? I don't fit that. And I
yeah,
don't want to. I wanted to for a really long time. But then when I got diagnosed, I was like, okay, now I know. For the first time in my life, I felt a sense of belonging.
right. Yeah,
The
yeah.
first time. And what's bizarre about that situation is that now I tell people I'm autistic and I'm excluded even more
Okay. Why do you think
in
that
social
is?
situations. I think people don't have. I think people have a lot of misconceptions about what autism is, and they don't know. Maybe they have a fear of saying something wrong, or they don't know how to behave around me.
Mm,
Or I think it's that. I think it's a fear, because when I was growing up, our school had a special needs classroom, right?
yeah.
Typical public school in Ohio, and it was kind of an us and them. It was black and white, right? Either you have a disability or you don't.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people grow up like that, and they think, okay, but you look normal in quotes.
Mm,
um and I don't know how to react to you. I don't know how to communicate with you, even though I'm quite friendly and warm, and I'm a very caring person.
mm,
And I think I show that when because I'm very passionate about what I do.
yeah.
um, I don't think I come across as like, unreachable.
Yeah. Absolutely not.
So it's very Yeah, it's very confusing to me as to why but that's been happening my whole life, right?
Mm,
So, but it's funny that now that I actually realize what the issue is, it's my autism. It sets me apart with that I feel a belonging, but then when I actually externalize that, I am excluded
yeah. I see.
socially.
And what do you think is the issue? Because we see sort of rates of autism, HD, ADHD, which are actually sort of on the rise exponentially. And this is sort of globally as well. Is it just the case that it's now getting diagnosed and it wasn't in the past? Or is there something from your research and your contacts that shows there's something behind this? Or what are your thoughts on this?
Well, my thoughts are there's no rise really. National Geographic had just put out an article about it's just that, yeah, diagnoses, people are actually self-diagnosing because
Okay.
there's either long waiting lists, or people are reluctant to give a label to some children, and even to some adults here in the Netherlands. They're quite reluctant to do that for whatever reason. And I think diagnostic procedures in some areas are getting better. But the problem is, I mean, when I was in graduate school, right, and I had to read thousands and thousands of articles about autism and research
Hmm.
various aspects. It was all about the 6-year-old white boy, right? That's who had autism, and there was a ratio at one point that said there's 1 girl to 4 boys, right, being diagnosed with autism.
Yeah.
But because women can mask a lot easier than men can,
Okay.
I can act like I fit in, but
Hmm.
that's exhausting, and I've been doing that my whole life. So now that I've gotten diagnosed this late in life, I have to go back and figure out who I am.
Yeah. Hmm. And
what I was sorry, I was mimicking all these behaviors that other people were doing because I thought that was what I was supposed to do.
yeah.
I was suppressing myself for a long time, and now I'm going through that journey of trying to figure out, who I am in relation to my autism.
And how are you doing that? How's that? What's that process look like, Kelly?
It can be really overwhelming sometimes. Sometimes I tell a lot of people I'm autistic, and then other times I'm reluctant because I think that if you're labeled autistic, oh well, you can't do your job then, because there's so many myths and misconceptions out there about what autism is and what people's capabilities are.
Right.
But I just take time. I take time out to look in the past and see various situations where, like, I'm just going to go back to work because that's what's affected me the most, right? There's an article called "They Get Fired All the Time and They Have No Idea Why." This
Okay.
is an article about autistic people that continually get fired for many reasons, right? For basically, it's a lack of awareness. So
Yeah.
sometimes I work with people that are quite blunt
Yes.
and they don't have that emotional filter.
Mm.
Not it's There's no intention behind it. I think that's what people misunderstand, is that I can be blunt as well. I just deal with reality. I can't deal with people that pretend something's not happening or pretend something isn't as bad as it actually is. I have to deal in reality and logic, right? I can't deal with anything other than that. That
Yeah.
that makes it very difficult for me. So I have to look back into my life and figure out, okay, I made all these decisions to try to fit in, but these were all going against the grain of who I really was. So yeah, I mean, a lot of lost opportunities and a lot of pain. Social rejection is painful. It affects the same part of the brain as physical pain.
Right.
And I've been rejected throughout my life.
Mm.
I talk to people in my high school on Facebook, and what was I like in high school? What was your perception of me? And they said you did whatever you wanted and you didn't care about what anybody thought. I was really into the Doors in high school, right? So I was wearing leather pants and, like, the Doors t-shirts in high school. I don't remember anybody else doing that. But there was, I think there were times when I was really myself and I didn't care, but there were also times where I desperately wanted to fit in, but didn't
Okay.
know how.
I see. So not having the sort of the steps, and you know, when we come to sort of the world of work as well, which is a kind of a strict environment in a lot of cases, how can the world of work better accommodate neurodiversity? And is there a desire to do this?
Yeah, there is. I mean, there's tons of companies popping up that are helping with DEI programs and
Mm.
coaching and, making workplaces more inclusive. And I want to read a quote. Really, design thinking is very much embedded in my work. And Kat Holmes is someone from Microsoft who wrote a book about design. It's called Mismatch.
Okay.
And I quote her as saying, design shapes our ability to access, participate in, and contribute to the world. And this has to directly do with workplaces, the recruitment process, the way job advertisements are worded,
Yeah.
the interview process, that first phone call with HR, all these, it's a mismatch, right? Because the way I behave or the way I write my CV is going to be different from someone else, right?
Yep.
The way I perceive a job advertisement, I'll take it literally. I take things literally. If somebody says something, I take it literally. That's what they mean, right? So if there was an article I read where somebody had a master's degree who was autistic. He was applying for jobs and he looked at a job advert. It said bachelor's degree required. Well, he didn't apply because he had a master's degree,
Okay.
right? So the whole recruitment process needs to be overhauled. And Ernst and Young, Microsoft, Deutsche Bank, they all have autism hiring programs now.
Mm.
But the issues with those are that there's still a social component. There's some people with autism that don't feel comfortable socializing, right?
Right.
So that's the group that I'm aimed at, trying to get into the workplace. because traditional hiring practices systematically exclude people with autism, and especially AI, when there's mass hiring going
Yes.
on. And yeah, and I've taken courses in AI and bias with autism, and it's the whole system is kind of designed to hire the same kind of person over and over again.
Okay, so that's something that needs so that was going to be my follow-up question. Is technology and AI assisting and helping? It sounds like it's not. It's actually sort of reinforcing some of the bias that already exists in the previous system.
Yeah, I mean, AI can, a lot like Zoom, they all have accessibility features, right? There's
Yeah.
more and more accessibility features, and Microsoft just came out with a whole slew of accessibility tools, which is fantastic, right? So it's like
Yeah.
speech to text, text to speech. I use AI to write and proofread some of my emails because of my impulsivity. I tend to send emails without the attachment. I tend to send emails without proofreading it and not noticing a mistake. And it also helps me, AI also helps me to summarize because I have a working memory problem. And I know what I want to say, but I can't get it down on paper. So I throw a bunch of ideas into AI and it formats it
Okay.
for me and organizes it, so that's really helpful.
And in a sort of a workplace setup, should companies and organizations be thinking about more options in terms of the diversity to allow people to maybe have more remote work, not to be forced into an office environment if some people feel uncomfortable or not able to deliver the value that they're capable of in a specific setting, allowing this kind of different approaches as a way to get the best out of individuals?
Yes. Flexibility in scheduling. Some people do, a lot of people with autism have sleep problems. So they
Okay.
sleep during the day and then they work at night.
Yeah.
Or I just spoke to someone yesterday who contacted me for coaching, and he said, they forced me to go into work 3 days a week. I don't want to do it. I get my work done. But at work, I feel awkward because I have to get up and walk around a lot. And it makes me uncomfortable. And he's constantly thinking, what is everybody thinking about what I'm doing?
Okay. I
Whereas if he
see.
was home, yeah, he could get up whenever he wanted. He could work whenever he wanted, as long as he got everything done. He should be allowed to have a flexible schedule.
Yeah.
That's really important to people because some days if I get stressed, my sensory overload is debilitating. If I go into IKEA when I'm stressed out, I almost have a nervous breakdown because my brain can't handle.
Same here. Same here having to go to that place. Oh
Man,
my goodness me.
even though I love IKEA, it's too much for my brain to process. And sometimes even
Yeah.
going and choosing a pasta sauce is overwhelming. It sounds ridiculous, right? But we have spiky profiles. So
Okay.
just because I can't pick out a pasta sauce within 15 minutes doesn't mean I can't be a really good autism coach, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the misunderstanding. I think people, because executive functioning issues, right, like planning, prioritizing, organizing, things like that. If somebody says, well, if you can't plan your day, how are you going to be able to do your job? Well, one doesn't have to do with the other necessarily, right?
Mm,
So we all need help. Some people wear glasses, people wear hearing aids. It's the
right.
invisible disabilities that are difficult for people to comprehend.
Yeah, exactly. But unfortunately, we haven't come as far as we should in terms of the diversity piece, in terms of understanding that, there's a great deal of value and fantastic individuals on the marketplace, but we need to adapt to be able to get the best out of them. And this one size fits all mentality seems to be something that surprisingly hasn't changed as much as certainly I would have expected from the sort of the HR profession across the organizational structure. One would have
Mm.
thought that things would have evolved a little bit more, Kelly, on this front.
It has. It definitely has, but it's very obvious, that some people, I've had experiences in the past where people will say to me, "Oh, yeah, you were very familiar with autism. We've changed our recruitment process, and I put somebody through that, and they say it was just the same type of of recruitment process that everybody has. We need
Okay.
to be transparent in companies. We need to be fair to people, right? So I think, offering choices of accommodations during the recruitment process is a really good idea.
Mm.
That's difficult enough for some people, and whether they're neurodiverse or not.
Yeah.
And I try to advise companies, and give them tweaks to their recruitment process and say, hey, this job advertisement this is going to be taken literally by someone, or there's a lot of things within the job description that aren't really necessary. I think if people just opened up a little bit and just were more sympathetic and empathic towards people that were different.
Yeah.
And a book that I would highly recommend in reading, if you were to read one book about autism, is Neurotribes by Steve
Neurotribes.
Silverman. He's
Yeah.
Neurotribes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book about the history of autism, and it talks about how we went completely wrong 80 years ago by saying that autism is a medical condition, in which it is not. It's just a
Right.
natural variation of the human genome.
Yeah. And this is the thing as well, kind of this label, problem, handicap, whatever you like to say like that, seems to be the wrong starting point for these things, because it makes you think there's actually something deficient or not quite as good, where the reality is just a different approach which is needed. And the cookie cutter approach to work
Mhm.
life and society is not the right approach that should be taken.
No, and why would you? I mean, if you're talking about innovation in tech, right? I mainly work in the tech field.
Yeah.
Why are you still dependent on these old, outdated, traditional ways of hiring people?
Yeah.
Because it's been shown that people with autism in studies are 30% more productive, and there's a higher retention rate. So
Right.
it's going to cost you more if you have a revolving door of staff coming in and out. Something's wrong with your recruitment process.
Mm. Mm.
You need to tweak that. And, I love my autism because I come up with really innovative, different ways of approaching problems. And,
Yes.
that's looking for bugs in a system, or, pattern recognition and attention to detail and hyper focus. All those things are really good to have in the workplace and a
Massively.
tech company.
Yes,
Yeah.
massively the case. And, if you're not able to sort of utilize the talent and the skills and expertise that exists, then you're going to lose out. So I think it's also framing this differently as well, Kelly. It's not saying, we need to actually sort of adjust because it's a nice thing to do for DEI and all this kind of thing. It's actually getting the
Mhm.
best things out. It's good for the company, it's good for the business, and good for the actual results. So it's self-interest. It's not doing something just for the sake of being looking good or giving your brand reputation something for the marketplace. It's actually straight bottom line business needs.
Yeah, and I think of it as in the micro sense, and I don't, I see a lot of things on LinkedIn, and I think it as a society we have a duty to take care of each other. I mean, whatever
Right.
happened to that?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
We have to take care of each other because there's what is this, the latest statistic? There's 186 million adults with autism globally.
Hmm.
That's a lot of people. And
Hmm.
if we get people off government benefits and people want to work, we're just like everybody else. We're not that different. We just have a different way of approaching things.
Hmm.
And, the systematic exclusion of us from society, it's got to stop. It's becoming better, but there's still, some managers and CEOs are very reluctant to hire people with disabilities. And I think they have a very outdated, archaic view of what we're capable of. And
Hmm.
as far as people saying, oh, it's very expensive to accommodate people in the workplace, out of the 4 years I've been working with adults, I think one had to buy a second monitor and one had to buy a chair. That was it.
Yes. Yeah.
Everything
Yeah.
else comes down to understanding and getting that person the correct support so they can be more productive. All you're doing is helping your company by getting your employees more productive in the workplace and hiring people that are more innovative thinkers.
Yeah, completely. And it's also a spectrum as well. And I think this is the thing, Kelly, that people don't realize. It's not a black and white thing. There's this the
Mm-mm.
scale of autism that needs to be understood, and it can manifest itself in very different ways too. And this kind of, trying to give this sort of broad brush approach and very sort of binary thinking on these kind of things is probably sort of the starting point for a lot of the problems that we experience.
Yeah, and when I give my autism presentation to companies, like I was working with a guy in California, and he is a software engineer, and he was the one having a lot of problems. He didn't have a filter. People were getting very upset with what he was saying, and I gave my autism presentation with him to his team and his manager, and within an hour, they understood exactly why he was the way he was,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
he's gotten along ever since. With but whereas before he was getting tossed around to different teams because people didn't understand why he was so blunt, and so it's a very easy thing to overcome. We just need to have people with a growth mindset. That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Is that people have to say, listen, not everybody in society is the same. Not everybody has the same needs.
Yeah.
Everybody gets what they need. That's fairness,
Yes.
right? It's not special treatment. There's some things about my autism that are quite painful. Social rejection is extremely painful for me. I'm very lonely. I'm very isolated.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
don't want to be like that. I'm a nice person, but people don't give me the chance because they know I'm autistic.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. These are the issues, and something that we need to sort of break down these barriers and break down the prejudice as
Yeah,
well. And I think it's just through the sort of the learning more, the education process, and getting people on board to understand what's happened. This is something that's absolutely crucial in this space.
definitely, definitely. And it doesn't take much. It
Yeah.
doesn't take much, because if you have a misconception of any kind of neurodiversity, right? I only speak of autism and ADHD because and dyslexia because that's what I'm most familiar with, right?
Yeah.
Because my master's degree is in autism.
Mm.
I'm not dismissing other neurodiversity during this
No, no,
talk,
of course.
but yeah, I don't know about them, so I don't want to speak about something I don't know. But yeah, it doesn't take much. It just takes a little bit of understanding. And I think sometimes when people see like a classic case of autism, like with a kid, I worked with children for 16 years. And I think if you saw the way that child behaved, you would say, okay, well, that child, people make a lot of incorrect inferences about other people's behavior. And I think
Yeah.
that's what we just need to explain to people, is that just because that child doesn't speak doesn't mean he's not intelligent.
Yes.
Just
Yeah, no, of
because
course.
he, throws his toy on the floor doesn't mean that he has behavioral problems. It means maybe he didn't sleep, maybe he's hungry. He can't tell us what he wants, so his behavior comes to have linguistic value.
Mm.
So we need to, stop making such quick judgments about people, like people that don't make eye contact during interviews, or they don't smile, or some people can't sell themselves very well to other people. So we need to look past those things and have better ways of getting to know people.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think it's very important element to look at for this piece too. And it's really good that you're here to shine a light on some of these issues, some of these these discussions. And thank you very much indeed for this approach. It's a very important topic and something that we can sort of come back to and follow the evolution over time. So thank you very much indeed, Kelly.
Thank you. It's lovely.